primary clientele that I've been working with are Naval Special Warfare and veterans through a program called Continue Mission. One of the cultural bridges that's difficult to cross is the idea of self-care.
I stinking hate that word.
If you're a 40-year-old dad and your kids are 10, what works for your sleep in your household might be different than when you're 50 and your kids are 20.
Rob Wilson, a performance educator who spent the last 2 decades training some of the toughest people on the planet, from Navy SEALs to UFC fighters, elite athletes, and first responders.
He's also the author of the book, Check Engine Light.
And these are tools and mindset shifts to help you take control of your stress, fitness, sleep, and emotional resilience.
The more common excuse people have is I'm too busy or I'm burnt out or I have too much going on in my life to actually take care of myself.
If you want to be a high performer, are you spending your attention and energy on junk?
For a lot of the people you interact with, sometimes it's knee pain, but it's not really knee pain, it's brain pain. Should we think about that?
Rob, welcome to the Ready State podcast.
Thank you. Good to see you guys.
Yeah, so good to see you.
Good to see you again. We have a lot to cover in this, and you're amazing. We're going to get deep into your amazing new book, which is a good reason for us to talk, but not the only reason.
Of which you wrote the foreword, by the way.
Maybe. Rob obviously had dark materials on me. And I was very glad to write it. And, I think it's a perfect setup because you and I have been coaching together for a long time. And we've been in the same circles and influence and buddies. And this book that we're going to get into is really exceptional. And there's something I just want to mention from the forward, because as I was really trying to think about what the concept of this book was and how important it was, Juliet and I had been bantering around with this idea that we were moving from what we called, first wave fitness, which was early on, right?
Yeah.
Power bars,
yeah,
crappy heart rate monitors. I mean, just, you're buying equipment from the York catalog. There's no Rogue Fitness. You can't buy Olympic lifting shoes. I mean, Target doesn't have bumper plates, right? Mm-hmm. And then we move into this second phase, which is just where we are right now. We're just coming out. I think we're coming out of the second phase, which is...
No, I sort of thought we were, and then I'm not sure we are.
Tech, YouTube, Instagram, 19-year-olds in the gym, in some commercial gym telling you that the masters are wrong, right? It's just like everyone is biohacking. It's crazy where our neighbors are asking us about intermittent fasting and which mitochondrial supplement to take. And then now we're in a place where we're beginning to see a nascent emergent phenomenon where coaches are starting to integrate, and we're starting to realize, hey, we ran this experiment wildly for the last 15 or 20 years. What can we get rid of? And we call this third wave. You have written the vanguard first book in this third wave. Tell us about Check Engine Light, the book, and why now? Why this book in this moment?
I think a really good illustration of this is what I was doing literally right before this call. So I was on another call with about 14 Naval Special Warfare active duty operators and veterans, talking to them about heart rate variability. And heart rate HRV, of course, is like the bee's knees metric. Everybody's doing it. Everybody got a Whoop or Oura Ring or, whatever, a earlobe implant or a retinal scan, something they've got, and they're measuring their heart, but they don't really know how to make sense of the information. And I think we have accessibility with these metrics in terms of equipment, and technology is democratized. Like almost everybody has a supercomputer the size of a deck of cards in their hand all the time. The hard part with all that is what information is relevant. Am I measuring what matters? And then once I have it, do I know what action to take? So having all the information, all the equipment, all the data doesn't really matter if you don't know how to make sense of it. And I think, at least my experience has been as a coach and as a manual therapist, is because of the training we get. And if you come up in like either the first or second wave of fitness, some of those questions become tacit to the way that you think. It's just about like, well, I'm used to having my hands on turning the wrench on the car. So I know it's built into how I'm thinking to know what's relevant or not. But most people, even some of the very highest performers on the planet, don't really know what matters outside of their domain of expertise.
Hmm.
So what I wanted to provide, rather than additional noise into the system, was to go, okay, how do you how do you tune your antenna a little bit better? And I think that is often done with an experimental framework. Like, okay, do I know how to test retest, right? Like you guys have been talking about for many, many years. Do I know how to even measure the effect of the decision that I made and look at, does this actually influence what I cared about in the first place? Or is this just some junk I'm doing? And since we all have finite
I feel
time,
busy.
yeah, I feel busy, but since we all have finite time on the planet, then it behooves us to become skilled, right, to this effect. At least I think.
It seems to me that this third wave fitness is, almost twofold. It's sort of making sense of all this data that we have access to, as you said. And then the second piece is, from a habit and lifestyle perspective, how to actually do these things. That's what we've really been focused on, is the how. We are of the mind that we have sort of come to an agreement, at least a lot of us in this third wave fitness, that like the things we all kind of agree on the things you should be doing to basically be healthier than like 98% of the people on earth. Like, I don't think any of us really disagree anymore. But what we haven't figured out how to do well is how to help people do these things in their life consistently and make sense of this data. So I love this. I really love the check engine light metaphor. Like, it made immediate sense to me when I saw your book. Like, how did that tell us a little bit of the backstory of that? Like, how did that land for you? Was it based on some kind of actual physical issue that you experienced, or something with one of your clients, or was there something off for you? Like, tell us a little bit about where that came from.
Yeah. So the last 3 years, a little over 3 years, the primary clientele that I've been working with are these naval special warfare, active duty guys and veterans, through a program called Continue Mission, which is sponsored by the Navy SEAL Foundation. And so basically it's a 4-week reset where they come in and get a holistic reboot of the entire system, like cognitive therapies, dietetics, from DEXA scans and blood work, strength and conditioning. The whole kitchen sink gets thrown at these guys to help them reboot the system. And originally, my role as part of this was one, like a vagabond who loitered in the gym. So that was my original position, and mentoring the very young strength and conditioning staff at the time. And one of the cultural bridges that's difficult to cross with that community in particular is the idea of self-care. And those guys especially, but all
I'm gonna pause. I stinking hate that word.
what's that?
Is that the problem? Self-care.
It's a phrase.
It is.
No.
I don't like that word, and it doesn't work for a lot of groups of high performing people, but especially for service oriented professions, it is oppositional to the culture, because things are mission, service, team, which is all help what's out there, not me first.
Right.
And so to cross that gap, because you do have to maintain the system if you want
PM,
it to
preventive
work.
maintenance, right? That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And so I would use things like, hey guys, don't you do a function check on your rifle? Of course you do, because you want it to work when it's supposed to work. Well, what about you? Do you have a function check for you? And so that kind of analogy morphed. And I would say things like, well, it's like a check engine light on your dashboard. Just because it goes off doesn't mean you stop driving and stare at the dashboard. It just means here's something that may require further investigation. That's it. And so using that analogy made sense, because it acknowledged the need to sometimes ignore it, but also if you don't address it, at some point the engine blows up. And so it covers both sides, because I think in the fitness, health, performance communities, people tend to be on one side of the pendulum swing or the other, where they're sort of like, shut up and do what's necessary, be tough at all costs, men don't cry, climb the mountain. And then there's the like, every single thing you feel matters all the time. And it's like, well, there's got to be some middle swing to this pendulum where, based on context, we should ignore or we should address. And so that's where the analogy came from, is it opened up an easy way to have that discussion.
I think Kelly has a question, but one quick point. We have been taught, what I love about this is one of the things Kelly and I have been talking about a lot is how many people we see, adults, and then also in sort of the youth sport context, just initiate this gigantic medical cascade when they or their kid like has a little bit of pain. And I do
my gosh,
love,
right?
right? The amount of people that we speak to, it seems to be especially bad with youth athletics and youth sports, where like if their kid has like a tiny bit of knee pain, they've already had like a CT scan and an MRI and seen like 27 specialists when, you know, their kid's quad was tight or something like that. So I love the check engine light idea, because I think for a lot of this just sort of everyday nagging pain that people have, which we often do as humans, you know, the check engine light metaphor makes so much sense, because I think it can help sort of say, hey, this is a check engine light. This isn't a catastrophe that requires you to like press send on this medical cascade.
Yeah, we even went out of our way to sort of define, you know, a check engine light is not the same thing as like an emergency shutdown of the engine because it's going to blow up. I mean, right? You could. I have never ever been poor enough in my life where I had to cover up a check engine light on the car.
Right?
Right? Like, I'm just going to ignore that
pretend like
knock
it doesn't
sensor
exist.
until I have to. Right?
Well, the thing too is that it's the check engine light is not the only indicator on the dashboard. It's just one. And so if it's only one thing that's happening, then it might not be sufficient. It might not be a sufficiently strong signal to act on. And I just want to say, as a brief aside, Juliet, I love that you said adults and men, because that is the appropriate way to frame us.
You know, I don't even think I consciously said that. I think that I just
Who are you married to?
that just came out somehow. Oh my God.
Adults and men catastrophize pain. Like, you are correct.
You know,
I love it.
let me give it an analogy for what I think this book does. I was a young physio grad student, and I was doing like my first standalone objective like intake of a patient and I have like this master's in the corner, and he's going to watch me, and I get 45 minutes to work with this person. And I walked out of there and I was like, I nailed that. I am PT God. Like, I just was like, come at me. Like, what you got, Frank? Shout out Frank Berniski. And Frank looked at me and he was like, what is wrong with you? Like, he's like, you're like a monkey on crack. I couldn't tell where you were going and you're thinking. He's like, you just kept throwing balls in there. And he's like, what's crazy is that you caught them all and landed on the right thing, but you need a plan. You need a structure. He's like, what I saw was you don't even have a sense of where to go. You just were putting more. When a parachute doesn't open, you put a second parachute out, and the idea,
You would know.
and the idea is more shit out. That's the idea, right? And that's what I was doing. And I think that really is the analogy that for most people who say, I think we can, in spite of where we are culturally in the globe, we all want to feel better. We all want our kids to be healthy, our partners to not get sick. We don't want to just sort of limp through life. But what we're doing is just throwing more stuff out, and we don't have a plan and a template. Take me through where I'm listening to this, but I'm like, I'm not a Navy SEAL. How is this relevant to me? I know that we love to use high performance because it really helps us to understand inputs and outputs and to really get the truth of the matter. But help me understand why, as a busy working dad who likes to ride his mountain bike, I should care about having a check engine light or a framework to understand what's going on under the hood.
Well, I mean, I kind of use like you said, I use the SEAL community as sort of like the stress test for a lot of this, but
And it's a good one.
right? The majority of the people that I've worked with over the course of my career are just like fit or trying to be fit working people with families. And furthermore, to that effect, Navy SEALs are just working people with families. Like they really just are. They just do really cool stuff. But we all have to be able to make, how about this? Especially in the current environment of attention grabbing busyness, it's very easy to become task saturated. And when
Mm.
that happens, we can get so overwhelmed that either we disregard all information as noise, or we become hyper focused and it leads to like a level of neuroticism. I've seen both happen. And this framework, what it does is helps people delineate signal from noise. And so in the book in particular, I present sort of some simple ways to categorize types of information, where it should live. I ask the reader to ask, like, to at least create an internal dialogue, like, have I paid attention to this before? What did I ignore? What happened? Do I know how to create an experiment for myself? So if you're a busy working person and you're just like, man, I would really like to sleep better, and you type in sleep into Google, you get like infinite sleep hacks now. You're like, whoa, man, I don't know what to do. But if you understand the basic idea of, at least for me, how to run a personal experiment, okay, what's a reasonable marker that would let me know if my sleep quality is better? What leverage point could I pick that would maybe make a difference and won't hurt me if it doesn't work, right? A safe to fail experiment. And then I try that for a little bit of time in the context of my life. And then at the end of that given time, I could go, well, did it work how I expected? Did it not? Why do I think that happened? Maybe I'll keep doing it longer. Maybe I'll try something else. And so now I have a thought process that I'm engaging in that helps me discover what works for me. And that's more important than reading every sleep study that comes out and knowing like the 500 human randomized control backflip trials, and like, should you take 5 milligrams or 7 milligrams of magnesium per night? And it's like, well, why don't you just like throw a general scoop in there for a couple weeks and just see if you feel better when you wake up, and ask yourself some questions that are salient. And if it works and it doesn't hurt you, keep doing it. And that,
I
right? Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, one of the things I loved about the book is, and you really hit on this. There are some things built into the way I think about all these things that, like you said, are tacit and implicit and sort of part of the system where I'm like test and retest. Like, is it better, same, worse? I mean, how long have I been, even going a step further of saying, hey, to the athletes and teams I work with, we're making a hypothesis, and then we're going to test our hypothesis on game day. And then we're going to refine our hypothesis, and then we're going to test it again. And that is so part of the way I think about all problems. And, if you come and see me for physical therapy, I'm like, hey, my hypothesis is that you have knee pain. We're going to mobilize your quads, and we're going to put in these isometrics, and let's see if it changes our fundamental, idea.
Yeah.
And then we'll reevaluate. I think most people do not think in this way. And, I would think that like when oftentimes when people are, if we take sleep example, they're throwing 3,000 things at the wall and they can't even tell inputs and outputs. And there's so many other aspects of their lives that they can't even begin to sort signal from noise. I think you're really onto it.
Well, human life is complex, and there is no solution for complexity because it's changing. So
Oh, TM.
right.
That's so good.
And so if you're a 40-year-old dad and your kids are 10, what works for your sleep in your household might be different than when you're 50 and your kids are 20. And it might be different if you're dealing with a specific health challenge. And so a dialogue internally in an experimental framework allows you to become adaptable. And the what you're describing, the way that you guys work with teams and when you have people in the clinic, is that you've been doing systems thinking for your entire careers, right? And those things are, again, like you said, implicit to thought structure. But for most people, in the way that the fitness marketplace sells things to people, is we have a solution for you. And most people think of their fitness in terms of there's this utopic end state of health and performance where if I get all the parts right, there's no more work to do. And
Why are we
Right. Like
laughing,
we
Juliet?
always, I don't want to interrupt you, but we always tell people like you
Utopic end
can't
state.
win fitness and health. There's no end game. Like we love the finite and infinite games book because that's what it is. It's an infinite game that you have to keep playing your whole life, and that requires flexibility and adaptability. The question I have for you is, you are sort of anti one size fits all approach, which we could not agree more with. But underlying that are, again, what we mentioned earlier, is there are some pretty understood principles when it comes to our health. People need to sleep, they need to eat some fruits and vegetables, some protein, we need to exercise a lot and have some friends, right? Like some basic principles. But with that sort of scaffolding of like basic
Do I have to
principles,
have friends?
I mean, you could try. Underneath that scaffolding of principles, there again isn't a one size fits all approach. And I think maybe this is what you're talking about with your longevity dashboard in the book. But how do, maybe give some more examples? Because I agree with you. I think not only is there not a one size fits all approach in any one person's life, because there's so many changing conditions, and that sleep example is the perfect one. But there's also, what works for you and works for me are not going to be the same thing. So how do we sort this out for ourselves?
Sure. So I think what we're talking about is, where is the leverage in a given context? And so the stable components, like you're talking about, like we all know that sleep quality is important, right? We all know that being aerobically fit is important, right? Now, people will argue, how much does this woman need zone 2, or does she need this much, or whatever? And it's like, I mean, if you're in the 80th percentile for your age group, you're probably doing pretty good, right? So is my sleep pretty stable? Am I eating like an adult, right? So am I getting enough fruits and vegetables? We know that protein is really important, fiber is really important, and total caloric load needs to be managed. But there's a ton of breathing room in that space for how a given person applies that in the context of their life at any given time period. And I think to navigate the forthcoming novelty that life is going to bring, we have to have frameworks that are adaptable. And so I think protocols can be helpful if we know that the protocol is up for negotiation at any given time based on my own outcomes. And that it's not for me to go, well, I watched the latest Huberman lab about red light before bed and I did it 15 minutes on the dot for this many days and it didn't have the result. So I just throw that whole thing away without any regard to what else is happening or what else I might need as a person and how that might change. And so I think that's what we're really looking at, is the anchor points are pretty well established, and not even just established because we have science. Like all of the oldest traditions are basically like, do you rest, bro? Like, do you pay attention to what you eat? Do you move around? Do you have a good relationship with your community? Does your life mean anything to you? And that's basically like the 5 things that we got to do. And other than that, it's, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream, right? And in the fitness community, we like to argue with each other about whose favorite flavor of ice cream is better, instead of thinking, hey, like, you just have to work against resistance on a regular basis, unless your sport demands a very specific type of capacity to win. And that's now we're talking about something different, and there can be lessons learned from there. But I think the big anchor points or the big levers are pretty well established. And then we can look at what's the context around that leverage point. And an additional point I would make is, over what timeline are you trying to change things? Right. And I think time is probably one of the least considered constraints when it comes to health. And people look at something like their sleep and their stress load, and they think like, well, I've been sleeping great for 2 weeks. How come I don't feel like I'm from planet Krypton? And it's like, bro, 2 weeks is nothing. You've been stressed and tired for like 10 years. Like, that's like if you were $50,000 in debt and then you saved money for 2 weeks, you wouldn't be like, how come I'm not rich?
I don't
Right?
get it.
Yeah.
I don't
I don't
like,
get it.
but that's not what the internet's telling me.
It's not-
Um,
and that's what we're fighting against.
I loved how, the sort of, I'm going to say recursive, not in a gnarly way, but it's elegant in the simplicity of, asking us to invest in what's important to us and to create a personal dashboard. I think that's one of the things that you do. One of the things I think that sometimes we're always talking about is like elite athletic performance. And I have to tell you, I don't ever feel fit. I had to load some tables into the back of the truck the other day, and they're awkward. This was like 2 days ago, and I was like, when am I ever going to feel strong and capable? I'm like, is that ever going to happen? I mean, I literally was like, I'm just not that person ever. And so I'm never going to get into this utopic, state that you talk about. But I think the typical person sometimes, if there's an avatar, is facing burnout and, grindness and just sort of pressure of pushing past the limits of sustainable effort. I feel like that's got to be sort of a bigger component to this mind piece, and we don't talk about it very much. How should I begin to create a framework, a check engine light on those things? Because I think that matters. And I know that conceptually, hopefully, people understand that the body and the brain are somehow connected, and that some of these physical practices do allow us to be more stoked or show up more stoked. But could you talk a little bit about sort of your experience in managing the burnout? Because that's real. And I'll set this up with just a piece of research just came out, and our friend Megan Young put it up, who's the strength and conditioning coach for the Sounders. And it just showed that kids who are chronically sleep deprived in college start to feel burnout from the load versus kids who get enough sleep can handle the load in college, right? And these are college athletes. So I set that up for you because I feel like for a lot of the people you interact with, sometimes it's knee pain, but it's not really knee pain. It's brain pain. How should we think about that?
Well, so I usually start with like if I'm dealing with like a working person who's just feeling cooked, the first thing we talk about it, and this is in the book, is like, for me, the first thing is bring clarity to problems and identify outcomes. Right. So we have to have a real honest conversation about what is the actual problem that we're trying to solve and what's the outcome that we're trying to get to. And in those cases, I usually will talk to them about something in the form of performance isn't free. That doesn't mean it doesn't matter if we're talking about elite level performance or if you're a college student and you want to get the dean's list every time and play D1 athletics and I'm like, the more ands you add, the more expensive it gets. I'm not going to tell you not to do that stuff because some of that is temperamental. Some people are driven super hard to be 80-hour-a-week workers, and they're going to produce. And I let them know,
Juliet,
if you want to work that way, fine, but it's expensive and you better have a cost mitigation strategy or you'll be broke and it'll happen fast, because that's how performance works. That's just the honest conversation. I don't try to tell anybody who's a high achiever not to be themselves. So be you, but know that you isn't free. So if you're burnt out, start looking at where you're spending money and go, what's the ROI here? And realize we all have limited resources that we're working from. And now we're starting to talk about things like allostatic load, right? What's the sort of the cost of maintaining the condition of the system over time?
This episode of the Ready State Podcast is brought to you by Momentous.
you've heard us say the Momentous 3 is pretty foundational. Creatine, omega, protein.
Yep.
right? And I think in the world right now, we're seeing so many people think that a pill is going to magically transform their lives. Not true.
Right. Well, the reason they're called supplements is
That's
they're
right.
meant to be a supplement.
We're supplementing your diet, right? Like, for example, our daughters do not eat fish.
Nope.
They do not eat walnuts. They do not get enough omega-3s.
Any walnuts.
Right. So they take omegas because that's what our blood panel says we should do. One of the things in that stack, though, is creatine. Yeah.
And let's just say the research just keeps on coming in that this is safe and effective for pretty much everyone.
Can I talk about my feelings for a second?
Yes.
I have been taking creatine since high school.
Yeah, but we had kind of a dark period where we stopped taking it for a while.
It's true, but I have been on probably because I couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
Right. I was like super broke student, but you're right though. You know, I think what I've run into, we were just having lunch. We ran into two people who said, I started taking creatine and I started feeling better. And I just ran into a coach the other night at Caroline's program and said, hey, my swimming is way better now because I've started supplementing with creatine.
Yeah, and there's all this really interesting, I think it's preliminary, but really interesting research that's coming down the pipeline about the potential cognitive benefits of taking creatine. So that's another interesting reason to take it.
You know what I think is sort of one of the best use cases is when I've had bad sleep from travel. I think we're starting to see like, hey, okay, creatine muscles, blah, blah, blah. But suddenly we're like, creatine for brains, creatine for concussions, creatine for sleep deprivation. Dude, this thing is very safe, very easy to use, and very inexpensive.
And what's amazing is Momentous now has so many different ways you can take it. You know, in the old days, we used to literally, if we traveled or went anywhere, we were scooping little
You're doing
scoops
sketchy stuff with a white powder.
into
at
like a
TSA,
Ziploc bag.
For sure.
But now, not only do they have these amazing travel-ready creatine sachets that also come in
sachet.
lemon creatine,
The lemon creatine is so
but
tart
they
and good.
just came out with these creatine chewables.
Yeah. And look, I think what we know is that barrier to adherence is the game.
Yeah.
What keeps you from doing it. And if you just want to throw some pocket rockets in your pocket.
And these things taste like Smarties. Like, remember Smarties from the 80s?
Oh,
they
yeah,
taste like
100%.
Smarties. And, you know, you could just like put a handful of them in your backpack before you travel. And
Yeah,
you can make sure
I've
you
heard
always
that,
have creatine handy.
Jeff, who is the CEO, his kids sometimes are like, Dad, can I have some?
Yeah, they want to
creatine
have like
chews?" It's
creatine chews for dessert.
and it's like a special treat. Yes, children, take these omegas and these creatine
Anyway, there's
chews.
just, to sum up, this supplement seems to be really essential for pretty much all of us. And
if you-
Momentous is creating a lot of ways to be able
That's
to
right.
fit this into your life without any issue.
If you're looking for like, hey, I want to simplify and streamline, make sure you get enough protein, get on a good omega, creatine. And go to livemomentous.com/TRS and use code TRS and save up to 35% on your first subscription. That's legit.
This episode of the Ready State Podcast is brought to you by LMNT.
I want to talk today about some use cases of LMNT.
Yeah, we had a really interesting thing happen with our friend's son, and he was struggling with persistent migraines. And there were a variety of things that his doctor recommended he do, but one of them was actually drink LMNT. And he wasn't just recommending electrolytes. This physician actually recommended LMNT.
I love it. We have had friends who have very low blood pressure. They add a little element. They don't pass out when they stand up. It's so weird how that works. And then the third use case is that oftentimes with some of the teams I work with, we play in the morning. Guess how much water kids have consumed in the morning?
I mean, usually none.
And so as a matter of course, we hand out an element and then they chug it. We get the electrolytes on board. We get water in the system. And my kids are a little bit sharper. And by kids, I mean total savage D1 players.
Yeah, and I mean, let's be honest. Let's put you in that category as well, because
You
your
hush.
preferred
You hush.
operating system is a lot of coffee and then some element.
What is that? What am I drinking right now?
You're drinking some hot
Yeah,
element.
and one of the things, the last use case is that oftentimes I really do like a hot beverage. And I think to myself, I have one like little Americanos in the morning. That's it. But sometimes I reach for the third one and I'm like, nah, dog, I don't really want it.
Yeah. Your brain is saying maybe you need a little
I just
water.
yeah,
or
and so I
something else.
switched to hot element. So right now I'm even just drinking a hot lemonade element, and it is delightful because it feels special. Because honestly, I'm 52. I don't want to just drink water anymore. Like, I've been doing that for half a decade. I think I could do better. Look, so many good reasons. And right now, if you order through our link, you can get a free sample pack of LMNT's most popular drink mix flavors. And of course, if you want to party your mouth, what should you do?
Try sparkling.
Go to drinklmnt.com/TRS.
We literally drink it every day.
Are you just, if you want to be a high performer, are you spending your attention and energy on junk? Do you want to be a high performer and you're staying up late watching TV? Because that's not free either. So it's like, how much money is in the bank? Where do I want to spend it? And what's the return? To me, rather than trying to find like hack strategies, oh, well, I want to work 100 hours a week, but if I could breath work my way out of it. And I'm a breath work dude, but it's like, you can't hack your way out of the life you're living. And so the first thing is we have to do a cost assessment. You know, if you work with a financial advisor, they don't tell you how to spend money first. They look at how you spend money first. And then they go, well, what do you guys want to achieve? And then, well, if we invest over here, this is high risk, but it's high yield. This is low risk, but it's lower yield. It takes longer. So once we establish with honest terms what it is that this person really wants, then I can say, oh, well, you don't want to feel burnt out? Well, maybe working 80 hours a week is worth it to you, but working 80 hours a week and fitnessing like you're an Olympian might not be worth it. You can't have your cake and eat it too. So you got this finite budget. Where do you want to spend it? And so that's how I generally approach that, at least as a consultant, around the conversations around that. In the book, I help people self-assess those things. So we look at different metrics, like some physiological metrics like heart rate variability, or what is your social life like? Like, do you have a good relationship with your spouse?
How do you quantify that?
Yeah.
Is my wife stoked to be married to me still? Red,
Yes.
yellow, green.
Green. I almost said red because of somehow. So earlier in the conversation, you mentioned the word resistance, which is a word Kelly and I have been talking about for years because we read a book, I don't know, 10 years ago called The War of Art, which I'm sure you read or know about.
Pressfield.
That resistance is like the universal force against creativity. But I think often when we're talking about our own health or well-being, the more common excuse people have is I'm too busy, or I'm burnt out, or, I have too much going on in my life to actually take care of myself. But often I think instead it's resistance. And I don't know if you share that point of view, and if you encounter a lot of clients who you think are experiencing that resistance, and how you coach them out of it, or how you approach that in your own life.
I mean, for me, I like to ask, what can you do? So where is their time? So I recently was helping my sister sort of get back on the health and fitness wagon. And the first thing we did was just get her a 10-pound kettlebell. Not because she couldn't lift more than that. She could have, but it's a non-intimidating weight. And she just kept it in her living room. And it was just, I showed her how to do a kettlebell swing. I'm like, hey, when you walk by this, 10 kettlebell swings takes 10 seconds. Probably 8. So I want you to try to do 10 of those a day. And then before you know it, she had a little bit more information. She started to get curious. What else can you do? What else can you do? So I try to start with what can you do? And I think that's a conversation that inspires a thought process towards problem solving, rather than I'm too busy, I'm too this. It's like, if I put a pull-up bar in your doorway, could you hang from it for 10 seconds? Well, yeah, I could probably do that. That's what we're doing then. Oh man, you know what? I could hang for 20 seconds. I tried to do a pull-up the other day. Then this happened, so the can starts to lead to building momentum in my experience. Are people extremely busy? Of course, we're like the busiest people ever, right? Like, this is the busiest time. There's always something to do, or something to watch, or something to read, or a podcast to listen to, or there's just always something to be done all the time. how can you structure your environment so that the things that you need are right there? What could you do in 10 minutes a day? It's better than 0
Rob,
minutes a
I'm going
day.
to interrupt you for a second.
Yeah.
How old are you?
44.
What age did you become so reasonable? What happens to all of the upstart, gnarly coaches who are like, this is the way? Like, what happened? Do you remember when that approach started to change? Literally every master in my life speaks like you do, and they get incredible results. What is it about that switch that you start to let go? Like, it's what we call post ego in the coaches, like this reasonableness. Is it just fundamental understanding of behavior of humans? Is it that the other approach doesn't work? What is it that makes you have this sort of expansive, inclusive approach?
Sufficient personal failure plus reflection.
I love that tidy answer.
Yeah, I mean, that's the truth, right? I mean, and that's failures of strategies that I've tried for myself, but also like failing clients. It's not like everybody I ever worked with got exactly what they wanted with no problem. I failed.
Recently, we've had two discrete and like totally different universes go through exhaustive testing in two different systems. And I was like, it's going to feel real sciencey. It's going to feel super sophisticated and cool. But I want you to come in there and say, what do I know about myself? Does this confirm or deny my already, or are you going to learn something novel? Like, I had no idea. Number two, what are you going to do with that information? Because I feel like we're still in this like, really sophisticated wool gathering stage. For most people, we're like, look at what I've done. Look at how complex I am, and look at the sophisticated people I'm working with, and all the supplements and the processes. And yet, no one actually takes that information and makes it actionable. And one of the things I appreciate you about your coaching and the population you work with, where I've spent some time, it either is like, if you are spilling and spewing bullshit, it doesn't stick. And we see, and I'll use my own example. I work with a lot of young athletes in their early 20s. And if you think you're an elite coach, go ahead and try to make some behavior change for some young college badasses who are 20. Like, you're going to see that your elite plan doesn't actually change anything. And I think one of the things you're describing a little bit is that, this reasonableness comes around, but it because you see it as so actionable.
Yeah, in when I teach and in the book, I talk about these sort of hallmarks, which are of like valid, reliable, and accessible indicators and tools, right? So I think we've got validity pretty decently covered, which is like, are my metrics accurate, right? They're the most accurate they've ever been, right? So we have really good measures of things. Right? You can buy a bed that tells you how much you moved while you slept. It's pretty awesome, right? Then we have reliable, like these things measure consistently, and these things are getting better and better engineered, right? You could wear a ring that works against the gold standard in heart rate variability. Pretty dope. And then you have access to it. Like, you physically can get to the devices, which is awesome. They're democratized. But the other piece of accessibility that I think we miss that you're hitting on is, once I get all this information, does it make sense to me? Like, is it relevant? And can I take action based on it? And if the answer is no, then everything to the left of that is irrelevant. So it doesn't matter how many human randomized backflip control trials from Stanford University. It doesn't matter if you have Russian scientists who are locked away in a basement for 40 years building the Iron Man suit of health. And if you get one for free, if you don't know how to operate it, it just doesn't, it ends up meaning nothing. And so for me, at least in the book and in my approach in general, the part that I care about the most is, can you do stuff, right? And then like we have all the biomarkers. And when I talk about performance longevity, right, that's sort of like the marquee component that I talk about is, you have all the biomarkers in the world But if they're not a reflection of your ability to engage with life more successfully, who cares? Like, if you're like, bro, I got the best hemoglobin score they've ever seen, but like you're still a selfish asshole. Like, I don't really care. It's like I want you to be healthy and cool and like take care of your family for a long time and be like a meaningful contributor to your community, not show me your blood panel and high five me. That doesn't mean that.
Yeah. Well, that's probably like that's currency at certain cocktail parties and conferences for sure.
It is.
So because you mentioned it right out of the gate saying you just gotten off a call about this, I do specifically want to get your take on heart rate variability. And let me give you some context here.
Oh boy.
Everybody's measuring it.
Yep.
We've had numerous people, experts on our podcast coming in and talking about it. There are billions of podcasts where experts of all kinds are talking about heart rate variability. It's the most obvious metric we can all see on our Oura rings and other tracking devices. And yet, when we work with regular people, they almost always say they cannot change their heart rate variability in any meaningful way, even after trying these strategies that you've talked about where they do one thing at a time, they try to focus on the big levers, they remove alcohol, they, cool off their bed, they go in a dark room, they try to sleep according to their circadian rhythm. I mean, like, we have numerous examples across many clients we've worked with who are like, this is annoying. I cannot make a difference in this, but I'm being told by the fitness industrial complex that this is like, if I can't fix this, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Can you talk about this? Because we just had a call about this with our Starrett system community. And, it's just like, it's been dogging us.
Yeah.
And we don't seem to have been able to help people, even though we're all still tracking all our stuff all the time. By the way, Kelly doesn't track anything, just FYI. So
I give it breaks. I do audits.
yeah.
That's my deal now. I sort of do audits of the system and go, I'm going to calibrate my perception with this information and make sure that the subjective metrics I use are still aligned with real objective data. And if they are, I move on.
Before you talk about HRV, like, what is that? Do you just put an Oura ring on like once every couple months for a week? Or because I do like that idea and might bring a more sane approach to a lot of people. Like, how do you actually do that in practice?
For me right now, I'm using the Morpheus. So I really like it because I put the chest strap on once a day and I look at it and I go, this is how I slept. This is how I feel. And then I move on with business and I'm not like going back and be like, my resting heart rate was 5 beats higher. I must do more aerobic work. It turns into like, it can become obsessive.
And that's Joel, for everyone, that's Joel Jameson's system called Morpheus. And he is an expert in conditioning. And I think it's Try Morpheus or Train Morpheus or something like that. And I use it. I have one. And one of the things I love about it is that it doesn't go into the atmosphere. It's just right there on my phone. And it doesn't require a subscription. Just we can start.
It's so user friendly. I'm really enjoying it. So I'll say a couple things, Juliet, in response to your question. So first of all, I just want to start by pointing out a really common like cognitive fallacy when it comes to the way a lot of metrics are used, HRV included, which is, we can call it like the Cobra effect or Goodhart's law, which is once a measure becomes a target, it's no longer a good measure. And so it's just like, so there's this really great story about colonial, when India was still a colony of the United Kingdom. They were having a problem with Cobra infestation in the sort of more metropolitan areas. And so the British Kingdom was like, hey, we'll pay you for every Cobra head that you bring to whatever, the local governor. And so what do people do? If you're a poor street urchin in colonial India and you want to rise up, you become a Cobra farmer. And you start chopping heads off cobras and putting them in baskets and getting paid. And that's exactly what happened. And of course, the government figured it out and they were like, oh crap, like When these guys are duping us. So they're like, never mind, we're not paying anybody. And then what they do? Well, all those Cobra farmers let all their Cobras loose. And so then there was a worse problem than there was to begin with. So rather than getting to the heart of the problem, they sort of attached a superfluous metric to it. And then everybody chased the metric. And there's numerous examples of this that we can look at. But the same thing happens with HRV. And what heart rate variability, of course, is a measurement of the cardiac response to autonomic stress load over time. That's really important to understand, right? When we're thinking about heart rate variability, we want it to be a demonstration of the behavior of the system. So my life is generally stable and I'm adapting well to the inputs of stress. So my HRV looks like that. Not, I need to chase this number because it guarantees me this outcome. And to give a really good example, I had 2 clients now in the last 6 months who had HRVs with the Aura ring that were in the upper 190s, sometimes breaking through 200. And of course, that's the upper limit of what's measurable. The problem is both of those people feel like shit. And so that number is no guarantor of my life is perfect and I'm going to live forever. It's sort of like death becomes her, right? If you take the HRV vial, then you'll never die and you'll always be beautiful. And it's like, what a load of crap. But what we want to see is this thing is like a bank account. And it just helps me understand the effects of my choices under certain conditions. And so if I take away alcohol at a certain time of year, it might have one effect. And I take it away at another time of year, has another effect. And so it just helps me understand my behavior in the context that it's occurring in, not I have to get this right. Now, the exception to that rule is if it's super low, like if you're at the bottom of the barrel, then now the lights on the dashboard are flashing. But other than sort of like sub 20s, some people feel really, really good at 35 HRV. And some people feel like dirt at 80. I had a professional grappler who's 21 and his was in the upper 80s when he had mono. So what I'm much more interested in are things like trends, ranges, right? Where's the ceiling? Where's the floor? What are the changes? When is there a volatility in the number that I didn't expect? Oh, I'm monitoring my HRV. It's mostly in the 60s. When I'm doing most of the stuff I should be doing, it's 90. Oh, that's weird. What happened? Oh, you actually got, instead of 8.5 hours of sleep per night, you got 9 hours of sleep a night for a couple of days before that. Dang, I wonder if I got more than 9 hours, if that would change how I felt and the number. So the purpose of it, sorry, go ahead. I'm like
Yeah, well, I was going to
monologuing
say,
here.
do you think the
Love
most, no, it's great. I mean, do you think the most sane approach for people, because that 35 number is really interesting because we seem to work with a lot of people who like are always in the 30s and that's like the level best they can ever get. Do you think,
It's too late for you. Move
yeah,
on without
do you
me.
think
Leave
a
me
more
behind.
sane approach for people like that is to say, do not get focused on any number, just try to say, okay, this is my general average number, and who cares if my neighbor has 60 and I have 32? Like, I'm a 32 person, and maybe I kind of take note if I fall down to 15, but if I'm kind of consistently in the 30s and that's the number I get and I don't feel like dog shit all the time, like I'm good. Or if you're in the 30s, would you tell anyone like, I still would try to improve that because something's wrong? Or,
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say improve it because something's wrong. I mean, the way I explain it the most is like managing finances. Right? So you could have 2 people who make the exact same salary. Doesn't guarantee one of them is happy, it doesn't guarantee that they're both happy, right? You could have both of them make whatever $150,000 a year, live vastly different lives. You could also have somebody who makes half of that, $75,000 a year. has what they want. They're frugal. They have everything they need for their family. Their basic needs are met and they have a positive outlook on life, and life is great. And then you have somebody who makes that 150 grand, they're miserable and they spend all the time and it's constant retail therapy. So those numbers aren't necessarily guarantees of quality of life. However, when you manage household finances, we look at, okay, what's the lowest number in the checking account that we can get to before we're in trouble? And then what's the highest number that we might like to see? And if I work for that, is it worth it? So let's say I want to make 150 grand a year, but I work 100 hours a week and I never see my kids and I'm disconnected from everything that matters to me.
Nailed it.
Right?
Nailed it.
I just, so that's how I tend to think about it. If you want to do aerobic work to leverage your HRV higher, and you go, I'm going to get Morpheus and I'm going to do 4 days a week of legit aerobic targeted work. And you're like, great. And it ends up being 4 or more hours of your life a week. And you're like, great. I got 70 HRV and it used to be 35. I never read books. I don't eat breakfast with my family anymore. I gotta like shower in 30 seconds at the gym. And I like don't look forward to this aerobic work. I hate it. But my HRV is a little better. It's like,
Yeah.
the-
Well, you'd have a conversation point at like the biohackers cocktail party, but you'd maybe be divorced.
Well,
Right?
you let's get some name tags that says "Ask me about my HRV." I just think that's, one of the things that I just saw it as a comment in something I put up, where I was just saying, "Hey, what are you training from the gym for? Like what's the point of all this?" And I do appreciate what you're saying is it's all the application of these things that matter the most. Like if you're crushing it and there's not a meaningful degradation of performance and you actually are meaningfully crushing it. You're not like I am crushing it and Juliet's like, dude, you're not crushing it. It's not like that. It's which happens. The comment was, I really like the gym. It's my favorite place. And I was like, that's so great. But you can't just put all these health metrics in like a room, like a museum in a bank account. It's not how it works. It's always about the application of the thing, the meaningful distillation of the thing as a human in society doing rad stuff. And I just want to sort of highlight for everyone the wisdom of what you said is just, it's so easy because some of these things are new and novel to us. We've lost the idea that, pull-ups are a terrible sport. I mean, it's the worst sport. I'm not interested in pull-ups as a sport, but I am interested in swimming faster and crushing the kids across from us in the pool because we did pull-ups. So like it's the application of the thing. And that leads me to this idea where we've really been talking about one-on-one. How do we begin to think about setting up environments or getting organizations and institutions to set up environments that are more conducive? Like, how do you help leaders, whether the executives or military operators, create environments to protect their teams from burnout? And in full context, I'm reading a book right now about the sports psychology of the All Blacks, right? It just came out. This culture piece is some of this, but getting a group of people together to go do something awesome means that you have to constrain the environment in some ways so that the outcome, the outputs are meaningful. How do you begin to think about that?
Well,
is that even possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we're talking about, really what we're talking about here is like organizing constraints that enable certain types of action to be able to take place. And, I work with some different organizations in the tactical space, and to some degree, from top down perspective, their job, right, is to, in every environment, is to organize constraints that say, here are the boundary conditions that we work within, because those things lead us to the outcomes. And leadership is about reminding everybody what the North Star is, right? So it's just like Juliet, like you're the CEO, like big chart your views, like guys, but remember, this is the rule that guides us. Or you guys don't know what to do. This is the rule that guides us. You guys are unsure about what to do, if you're supposed to do that or not. This is the rule that guides us. That's boundary conditions. And so if you're in a sport or an organization environment, then what you're doing is setting the conditions for action. But there has to be feedback that comes from the bottom that says, this is what we want. So the players and the coaches who are at the boots on the ground level have to also organize ourselves or themselves appropriately, that either continues to say yes to those boundaries or says, those boundaries don't work, we need new ones. Am I making sense? Yeah.
Yeah.
What this book, you've been in the weeds coaching your brains out for a long time in meaningful places where inputs and outputs matter, readiness matters. It's not just like, yeah, great, you went and PR'd on your bench press. That's not the sort of environments you're in. What has changed for you since you've written this book in your thinking around these problems of, I want to be a human being who feels great about being a human being?
I would say the biggest thing from sort of excavating my own thinking and putting it, when you, as you guys well know, when you publish something, like now your ideas are in the world to be
Good luck.
scrutinized, right? And so for me, the serious importance of how much context matters has become like a key realization, and is something I speak about much more explicitly. And when I look at what the book ultimately like does for people, it helps you understand your own context. Like when you say what works for me as a person, what you're saying is, what's the context I'm working in, right? And so going from, being like basically I was a fitness coach, right? I was in a CrossFit gym for most of the early part of my career. And what did matter was that people were benching more, right? And I coached powerlifting, and what mattered? Squat, bench, dead, right? That matters. But as soon as you start working with people who have different outcomes in mind, then that's a shift in context. And so when you work with a GWAT era tier 1 operator who's going to a nasty place soon, how much energy gets spent on bench press that is unnecessary and takes away from things that are more important? And that's where my realizations around context started to come to the forefront. And then I realized that applies to everyone. It doesn't matter if you're a carpenter and your wife's a nurse and you're just trying to manage your household and you would just like your shoulder not to hurt as much. The stuff you do is still in the context of you. So if you try to do like the perfect thing without thinking about who you are, your results will be limited at best, right? So that's really, as I've written the book, things have changed for me in terms of realizing what I'm actually talking about is contextual coaching, right?
I love that. And uh, I know you already are spinning up, if not have already spun up another book. And you don't need to tell us about that.
Sucker. But I'm
But-
so glad. I hope
but
it's
we're really
another
excited
thing
for you.
As
Yeah.
I said in the intro, I said, I'm so glad you wrote this book because I never wanted to write this book. We didn't want to write this book. And I was like, good.
That's
Rob's gonna write
amazing
this book.
and highly recommend. But what are you looking forward to? What are you excited about? What's next?
What problem are you going to solve for me next, Rob?
So I've been working with Stu McMillan of Altus, who I know you guys know quite a bit, and we're working on a white paper right now about complexity science informed coaching. So that's sort of
We love Stu.
he's the best, and working on that project and working with Altus quite a bit. Got a couple books in the works. Well, TBD on exactly what and when. My bucket list thing is a children's book that I've had for years. That's like health related. That's like my marquee thing. Like if I can get this children's book into the world, I'll be like, I did it. I am the man. I've wanted to have a children's book forever. It's
I
they're
did
like,
2,000 pull-ups in one
Yeah.
set.
Yeah.
I've done-
Your children might be like in their 30s, but it's never too late.
yeah, never too late. Well, my daughter's actually a 4th grade teacher, so maybe she can
Go
relate to
figure.
her
Go
students.
figure.
I know it's weird.
Rob, again, huge congratulations on your book, Check Engine Light. It's amazing. Kelly obviously did a great job as well on the forward.
Amazing forward.
Highly recommend. And I know that people can get that wherever you buy your books. So we're not going to necessarily link to that. But where can people find you, follow you, keep track of what you're up to, learn from you, and so forth?
Yeah, I'm on the socials. I'm on Instagram at the Check Engine Light. And then I also have a Substack called Check Engine Light, where I release an article pretty much every week. I think I have something like 150 articles. It's free to subscribe. They're all short, sub 10-minute reads, just sort of whatever I'm thinking about that week.
Love it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's been fun to be your friend and fellow coach and watch this trajectory of sophistication turn into just elegance and practicality. It's really fun. And I can't wait to see where that big, beautiful brain goes next, my friend.
Thank you very much. 2008 is when I emailed you the first time. When you
That was a
wrote,
really long time ago, Rob.
when you
I'm
wrote,
sorry.
when you wrote Hamstrung for the CrossFit Journal.
Oh, man.
That was a great article.
That was a great article. And I was like, he's doing the stuff I want to do.
Hamstrung,
Yeah.
where I think I said something like, not stretching is like not flossing.
You might have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rob Wilson, thank you so much,
Thank
my
you.
man.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kelly and Juliet. Appreciate you.